Back at it with the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. With you as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City, talking Chiefs football. Eric Eager has dubbed it the best Chiefs podcast in the world. So there it is. You found us. Congratulations. If you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live usually Tuesday nights, 8 or 9 p. Central. Just depends on what's going on, but right in that time range. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best. Why risk any problems with your parking lot when they can all be solved? They've been solving parking lot problems since 1994, whether it's one location or many. GAN Asphalt's got you. Cooler weather's coming. Get booked right now. They're booking up fast, especially on the weekends for businesses that need that parking lot during the week. Call 816-484-3338 or find them online at ganasphalt.com. Chris Jones says he's not going to be back till week 8. What does this mean for the Chiefs? Time to move on. Will he be with the Chiefs in 23? How much does the defense miss him? We talk about that here tonight as Shane Buechele edged in front for the backup quarterback spot is Clyde Edwards-Helaire going to be the lead running back. Certainly looked so in the preseason. Rashee Rice comes up big in Arizona, so did Justyn Ross. What does that mean for the wide receiver corps? We'll preview that. I hear from Matt Nagy, the offensive coordinator, on that front as well. It's all coming up right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And back at it with you here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Gentlemen, another preseason game has come and gone, and there is no sign of Chris Jones. DEFCON ratings are what many people are trying to use to describe this. What would you use to describe where they sit right now with Chris Jones, Jeff?
A potentially ugly situation.
Okay.
And I said this on our last podcast, just that this is the stage now where people start getting emotional. That I'm sure Steve Spagnuolo is not happy about this. I'm sure Andy Reid's not happy about this. I'm sure Brett Veach is not happy about this. And I guarantee you, Chris Jones is not happy about it. And so the next step now is to figure out what is going to push one or the other into a place where they need to start, getting Chris Jones back into the building and onto the field. And so I that tweet he sent out about week 8, he might have been trolling, but he also might be thinking it's worth thinking about that as a way of getting what I want out of this.
I mean, what he wants is money, right? How could it be worth losing half a season's worth of paychecks when he's already been fined to this point? I mean, does that just doesn't seem rational? You talk to a lot of players. What am I missing?
You don't get into this situation whimsically. I find it hard to believe that Chris Jones sat around and said, let me just hold out and see what happens. I'm sure that he and his agent sat down in the offseason and said, we want this number. What are you prepared to do to go get it? And if it gets to this point, are you ready to go to this point? And so I don't think that there's any real panic on his end of it of like, I'm losing money. I mean, Chris Jones, people keep talking about this like, well, how much money does it take? Well, he's made a lot of money. He's not in a position where he needs to be desperate about losing money. I mean, $1 million to someone like Chris Jones is not a lot of money. I mean, to us it is, but to him, I think if he had come in after training camp, I would have said that was his statement. That was a nice effort. Now that he's here, he pretty much believes Charleston Minihue is not playing for 6 games. I've been the second best player in football last year. I've helped this team win 2 championships. That defense without me on the field is not going to be that good. I've got some leverage to play here. And it's my last chance to play it. I'm going to play it.
I think that was an interesting point, Jeff. I heard your spot with the Border Patrol this morning, and you talked about how as soon as the Menahu went out,
I think
Chris Jones shifted gears. Maybe they ramped it up. Maybe they decided, okay, we've got more resolve. Now we can do this. And maybe they changed their tune on what it was. Eric, I mean, you certainly want him to play. You got here. You didn't get here with Tyreek Hill because you knew you were going to get here. The fact that they're here, they didn't think they were going to get here with Chris Jones. Does that force their hand to go ahead and give him what he wants, or are they in a position where they can still hold out and play the long game and not worry about Chris Jones and how much they lose without him now?
Yeah, I think that they play the long game here. I mean, this is last offseason's interesting because they weren't desperate to win a Super Bowl, but the clock was ticking again on that number 2 for Mahomes, and there's questions about whether they could do it with him making all the money and all this kind of stuff. And now that they've answered all those questions in the affirmative, like Chris Jones might say, hey, without me this year, you're not doing a thing defensively. And I actually agree with that. I think he's right. And the Chiefs could go back and be like, look, over the next 8 years, we want to win 3 Super Bowls, not this next actual 1 Super Bowl, right? Or whatever. I'm making up those numbers. But the Chiefs are in a position where they never have to be desperate for any one season. And so I just think, like, I don't think they're panicking at all about this because Jones doesn't impact their long-term plans a ton, being his age and all that stuff. And this one season, I mean, the Chiefs are going to be in it no matter what. They were in it when their defense was terrible in 18 and 21 and all this stuff. So I don't think that they're sweating this as much as maybe as at first blush. They probably were surprised that his agent didn't want to play ball or is asking for too much money. But I don't think that they're panicking as a result.
Yeah. To me, some of the reality is, and Jeff, you brought this up on our 2D podcast. What happens to the locker room, right? When Chris Jones comes back in week 8, does he tear apart the framework of the team? I mean, the Commanders were going nowhere when Trent Williams did this. That's our most recent example of it. We saw Dan Williams way back in the day do it with the Denver Broncos. I mean, he didn't come back. Actually, he sat out the whole year and then ended up getting traded to Kansas City. I mean, what would you expect it to do to the locker room?
Well, there's a lot of young guys in there, and it's going to impact them. I said on the radio show too that Chris Jones has been around for a long time. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of factors going into this that just revolve around familiarity, right? They know Chris Jones really well. They know his work habits. They know what he likes to eat. They know when he gets fired up. They know when he's not playing as well. And he knows, like someone just put on the screen, Tyrann Mathieu left town without a contract. Tyreek Hill got traded. Orlando Brown didn't get a deal done. He was here when Eric Berry was sour with the organization. He was here when Justin Houston was sour with the organization. So he's seen a lot. And so in a lot of ways, on the one hand, you got the Chiefs. And I respect where they're at with this, which is to say they have shown no desire to get into the 30-year-old and up paying a lot of money business. They've been clear about that. And Chris Jones is saying, you don't win championships without me as a player, without players like me on your team. And this is my last chance to get paid. I mean, what Chris Jones knows is that I use Javon Hargrave as an example going to San Francisco in this past offseason. Javon Hargrave's a year older than Chris Jones and got $40 million in guaranteed money going to the Niners. He's not even close to the player Chris Jones is. Chris Jones is saying if I get to free agency, I can make a lot of money. And so whatever I'm losing now, I'll get back. And so he's willing to fight for that. And I can respect that. It's tough because the Chiefs' kingdom is caught in the middle of all this. But as Eric said, it's like it's easier to part ways with Tyreek Hill when you still have Patrick Mahomes, you still have Travis Kelce, and you still have Andy Reid. It's a lot harder to let Chris Jones walk away when ain't no one else on that side of the football close to him as a player.
Yeah. You kind of had a couple of interesting looks on your face, Eric. Are you of the belief? I mean, that Chris Jones is a guy they can't walk away from?
Well, Chris Jones last year set a different level of play for him than he's ever had. When you look at the numbers, you look at pressures, snaps, how often he played, how efficient he was. Chris Jones is an absolutely different player, almost twice as valuable on the field last year as previous years. Now, the Chiefs have made Super Bowls. They've had 1 seeds, and they've won a Super Bowl with Jones being, good and great, but not best player in the league. The idea that they need him, I think, is a little bit overblown. And I think it's because we watched a playoff, series last year where the Chiefs' best player and the best player in the world was hobbled with an ankle, and the defense, especially the Cincinnati game, made some play. I mean, Chris Jones didn't do anything in the Super Bowl, but at least in the Cincinnati game, he took over a game that they absolutely needed because their offense was hurt. You re-rack everything, and if the offense is healthy, do they need Jones playing at that level? I don't think so, because they haven't needed that in the past to be a champion.
Yeah, that's interesting. A couple of the comments that are there. This one was interesting. Is Pat more angry at Chris Jones or Veach for this? He's taking less to avoid this stuff. Does this irritate a Patrick Mahomes, Jeff? And does that end up forcing the hand of the Chiefs?
He's made some comments that sound like he's frustrated as well with this, but this is all a reality of having a really good team, having a team that win championships. It's not going to be all kumbaya and love playing for Chiefs Kingdom, and it's every year is going to be. I guarantee you, every year there'll be a player who's going to be maybe not at the position Chris Jones is, the stature of Chris Jones, but somebody's going to be pissed off about a contract. Somebody's going to be unhappy about what they're doing. Somebody's going to feel like they've done more to help the franchise win. And I hear what Eric's saying. I respect it. But you can't tell me Chris Jones wasn't a big part of this team winning championships and that it was all Patrick Mahomes. That sounds great in theory.
That's not.
But at the end of the day, it's like the defense, they've won championships when the defense has played at a high level. When the defense hasn't played at a high level, they haven't won championships. It's been that simple.
I'm not saying that he's not there's not a downgrade from him to the next guy. What I'm saying is this situation's really complex because they won last year. I said it, Petro, we did the show live when they were playing the Jaguars, and I'm like, Patrick's carried this team for 5 years, and the Chiefs are going to have to carry Patrick now. And to a large extent, I mean, you think about that sack at the end of the Bengals game, obviously early on in the game, the pressures in the Super Bowl against the Niners, you had the pass breakups and stuff. But so obviously he's a great player. My issue is the complexity of it is even back to 2021, he wasn't that good of a play. He wasn't a 10 out of 10. And, so we've seen him very, very recently be a great, but not top of the market player at his position as late as 2 years ago. And is there a chance that he stays the best defensive tackle in football 2 years in a row? Yeah. Is it likely? No. And so it's all these competing factors. And the question is do they need Chris Jones to win a Super Bowl? And I think eventually they can recreate it in the aggregate, not this year, of course, and they're going to take a hit with it, but in future years they can. So I think that they can replace him.
All right, so I want to highlight what Brad said a little bit ago. Should have taken Eric's advice 4 months ago and traded Chris Jones on draft day. We all kind of all right, come on. And when Eric, in his mock draft, which had no trades, decided to trade Chris Jones and make everything. Let me ask you this, Jeff. Who would you rather have? Chris Jones or a second-round draft pick, Javon Hargrave, Dalvin Tomlinson, the second highest-rated defensive tackle behind Hargrave, in free agency, DeAndre Hopkins and Juju Smith-Schuster. 5 for 1. Second round pick, Hargrave, Tomlinson, Hopkins, Smith-Schuster. Those 5. Any second round pick you want. We'll put it somewhere in there. I don't know. You can pick wherever you want. Would you rather have those 5 players or Chris Jones?
I take the 5 players. I mean,
obviously. Well, that's $19.3 million in cap space.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's Chris Jones. It's not just what you get in a trade. It's all the players that you can get and fill up. Or it's 2 of those guys, pick the 2 you want and sign an extension for Snead. Or next year it's Creed Humphrey or whoever it is.
I agree with you.
It's like when we talk about, I agree that Chris Jones was very important to winning the championship. And I definitely don't think they beat the 49ers without him. I think those batted passes might have been the key to them winning. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit.
No, they were critical.
But the point is, if he's gone, you're not just without him. You open up cap room and have an opportunity to add a lot more players.
That's what I'm saying. His leverage is he's tying up cap space. I'm sitting here saying, why should I do anything? I'm costing you $29 million of cap space this year. If you want to franchise me next year, guess what? It's $32 million. They don't want to do that. They want space. That's where the leverage comes from for Chris Jones. And again, I'm not sitting here advocating one over the other. I think both sides have legitimate arguments, but the notion that Chris Jones has no cards to play here is just ridiculous.
No, he has cards to play. I'm saying, like, by the way, put up Quinn's thing. It's not revisionist history when you predict, like, when you are talking about things that, like, we're not going back and be like, oh, they should have traded him. We were talking about trading him back then. Okay. Anyway, so the issue with the cap space argument is that it cancels out though, right? Because you could say, oh, I'm tying up 30 million in cap space. And then the Chiefs are like, who gives a crap? Because all we're going to be able to sign with that is some washed up running back off the street. So like right now it's sort of, but to your point, Jeff, getting rid of Jones right now there's no benefit. And Jones being like, I'm tying up cap space is like, well, that's a sunk cost already, because the only time you could have actually spent that money was like 5 months ago. So like that's my issue with the whole cap space. I think that's a sunk cost at this point for both players.
Do we think that like, listen, can we agree that the Chiefs, I think, and you tell me if you agree, the Chiefs misread this, right? They this is a mistake. If they're sitting here now, they misread it, because they were very adamant and open when they traded Tyreek Hill that, it got out real fast. He was going to hold out, and we weren't going to mess with that. They put that message out there. That means they wouldn't have done this if they thought this was a possibility. So we can agree that this is maybe, and I'm not saying fire Brett Veach or Andy Reid or anything like that. I'm just saying this was a misstep. This was a mistake that can be overcome, maybe by eventually getting him in. Maybe it'll work better in the long run. Maybe it keeps him. They got pissed at Orlando Brown when he didn't take their offer, and they let him play for 1 year on the franchise tag. Spent about 5 minutes trying to get him signed, and immediately pulled the deal and watched him get a lot less. Like that. This may be, if Chris Jones signs someplace else for big money next year and has the kind of injuries that usually older players have, this may be what saves them from themselves in the long run. But there's no doubt that being here right now is a mistake, right?
Yeah. Look, yeah. To answer your question, yes, they misread it. You don't know how much that tweet he put out back in February, March, when he said, I want to be a Chiefs for life, a Chief player for life, was at the foundation of all this. I'm sure his agent's head exploded when he saw that. But yeah, they believed he wanted to be here. I totally think that drove everything. The Tyreek Hill move, Beach has been very open about. They were clearing up money to make this kind of move for Chris Jones. Now, what they couldn't anticipate was Chris Jones saying, my number is here, and if your number's down here, we got a problem. That's where it's gone. And I really believe just the climate around the NFL has changed a lot. These players are very much aware of what other people are doing. So when Zach Martin held out and got $18 million more from the Cowboys, Chris Jones said, you know what? I can win this. When Jonathan Taylor's doing what he's doing, you know what? I understand that. And so and people compare him to Patrick and Kelsey and taking less money. Those guys are making money off the field that Chris Jones is not making and will never make. And so
I don't know. He's finally doing a commercial. And you also don't know how much of that is his unwillingness to do the things it takes to make the commercials,
Well, he plays the wrong position. How many Aaron Donald commercials you seen out there? Or Nick Bosa, TJ Watt. Not many.
He's on one now, which I think is funny, with Travis Kelce wearing a blue jersey, maybe foreshadowing for where he was going. But he's on one for the new Sunday Ticket. He and Kelce.
Yeah, but to answer your point about, I do think they misread it, and I do believe they felt as if we've got 2 championships, we've got the faith of the public on our side, you'll cave, and so that's what Chris Jones is fighting against.
Yeah. Interior defensive linemen play well into the 30s. Cam Hayward, Calais Campbell are examples. I do agree. I mean, I think that's the only reason they're talking to him is because of that, right? I think they don't even consider a corner at 27. So, yes, I think they're hip to that fact as well, and that's why they went down this road with him. Will Jones be a Chief beyond 23, Eric?
No.
That's
I think
done?
This is Orlando Brown. Like, so backing up, because I think Jeff only got to answer this one, but like, I think the Chiefs overestimated, what Chris Jones is going to take from the Orlando Brown situation. Because to me, this is a very similar situation where you have an agent who has very few players and very, very, very few star players, who is trying to, and I've worked with these agents before when I was at PFF. When you only have the one player who's a star, you try to rip the eyes out of that team because that's your only shot, because you're getting whatever percentage of whatever percentage of whatever percentage. And so, when we talk about these other players, it's more of established, like they're, the trading and all that kind of stuff is more established. I think that I think they looked at the situation and said, yeah, Chris and us are far apart. But he saw what happened to Orlando Brown when, you try to play hardball and you don't come back to the table when to negotiate. Like, and Chris Jones is like, I'm better than Orlando Brown. I don't need to deal with this crap.
Jeff, is he a Chief after, anytime after 23?
No. He's played his last season here just because of.
Or will wait a minute. He's already played it, so you think a trade will happen, or he sits out the whole year? What?
No, I think he's done after this year.
Okay.
I think he'll play this year. Now, how many games he ends up playing will be a different question. I mean, he could come in here and he could, I don't want to assume he'll be a bad guy, but anything's on the table at this stage. He could come in here and he could fake injuries. He can come in here and be a pain in the butt. He can come in here and get into it with Andy or Beach. He can miss games. He can miss 10 games and say, I'm just going to write it out. Again, Trent Williams did it, and I'm getting the highest paid deal in left tackle history. But here's the thing that people have to understand about the Chiefs and any team that has the kind of run they're on. The Patriots, there were a lot of people who couldn't stand what the Patriots were doing, who played there. Couldn't stand Bill Belichick, couldn't stand the way they operated. And the reason they were able to do the things they did was because they were merciless about it. And so there are a lot of people who were just fearful, who bought in or just stayed for a minimal amount of time and got out during that 20-year run when they got their 6 championships. That was never this was the greatest way to play football, and our way is so high-minded. And it's like, this is what it looks like when you're winning. People get greedy. And I think it's just as it's wrong for people to say, why won't Chris Jones take what they're offering or take less money? Why won't the Chiefs pay more? It's the same question, because both sides have things they want to get accomplished, and it's very hard to make that work in the NFL when you got a great team. It's just hard to make it happen for everybody.
Yeah, I think it is. And the Patriots were always the team that would move guys. We've had a couple people mention Richard Seymour and trading him. Eric, what would he bring right now, this time of year? What would it take to move him on out of town if you wanted to try to do it before the season started?
Yeah, Seymour was worth a first-round pick for the Raiders back in 2009. That team seems a little rich, but I wonder, if it gets into the season, right? Like Khalil Mack was younger when this happened, but that was 2 first-rounders. That was this time of year. Jamal Adams was 2 first-rounders. So they're like,
Khalil Mack was actually minicamp. I looked that one up. I thought it was this time of year as well, but it was actually minicamp.
It was this time of year. Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Right, because he got traded, and then like that first game against Green Bay where they got that 20-point lead and got caught by Aaron Rodgers, he had like a pick 6, and that was like the first time he ever wore the uniform.
Yeah, it was late. You're right.
It was late. So
the Bear. I'm sorry, when he was moved from the Bears.
Yeah.
That was in March. So you're right.
Hit first contract. So but yeah, I mean that shows. But like Khalil Mack's the rule prover there too, right? Like Khalil Mack, a good enough player to be worth that in a trade, and then second contract comes up and he's traded for a bag of baseballs to the San Diego Chargers by the Bears. Like the fact that Chris Jones is even like up for this deal shows that he's already conquered Father Time. Even though yes, there are examples of players who overcome it. He's conquered it. I would say the Chiefs for a team that's desperate. And look, an NFC team that's bad, right in our eyes right now, is going to win the first 2 games and be like, oh, we're in it. And that team's going to pay a first-round pick for Chris Jones.
Desperate teams are the ones I think would be interested in him, right? Like that in my mind is where you're looking. And so you got any scenarios where you can see who would be if it's like, okay, hey, the asking price was a first and a third. Now it's a second-round pick. Who might be interested, Jeff?
Oh, if it's a second-round pick, like I have to go back and look who has what.
To Eric's point, like the Richard Seymour deal did not work for the Raiders.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't play bad football, they did not become a better team. And so I think that will loom large over, and the Chargers haven't gone anywhere.
You mean the 49ers talking
about?
you're talking about Seymour, Richard Seymour.
Yeah, Richard Seymour back in the day.
That's like
a long time
get
ago.
the trade screwed up.
Long
I think the Dolphins would be in play. Second-round pick. Dolphins would be in play for sure. Who else? Any team that's got a guy on rookie quarterback, rookie deal, I guarantee you that the Bengals will make it happen. Carolina, yeah. I mean, anybody that's close. Who else would be in the mix there? Green Bay, certainly, with Jordan Love on a rookie deal. At least on a 20.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, yeah. I was just thinking about the money.
Kick the tires on Washington. You got a new owner with a lot of money and a coach that's like knowing he's got to win right now. That's a defensive side-minded coach.
Yeah, they've already paid their 2 interior defensive linemen, though. That's the issue.
They got some studs. Yeah.
I would always give it a shot.
Seattle.
Anyone
rebound.
Yeah,
Seattle needs a pass rush for sure. That's a good one.
I do like the Dolphins as well. I think that's a good fit. The Browns are always liable to do something
next to Myles Garrett. Yeah, although they got cap issues with that quarterback salary over there.
I mean,
he'll have a market. I mean, I've said this repeatedly, and someone was asking a question about average salary per year, and I think that's what's one of the most frustrating parts about talking about this is so many people get caught up on he wants $30 million a year number. It's really the guaranteed money. I keep saying it's really, if you look at the number he got, the last contract, it was $60 million in guarantees. I would be surprised if he didn't want $80 million. And I would be surprised the Chiefs are saying, how can we give that to you starting at age 30? Like, how can we make that work with that kind of number? And so it comes back to being very familiar with who you're giving the money to. As Eric said, it comes back to trusting that you can find a way to get beyond this if he doesn't want to be here. And is Chris Jones the same Chris Jones we saw last year in 2 years? I don't think he's going to be that. And I don't think the Chiefs should overpay for that. And if that's the way it's going to be, then they have to prepare for it's a long year with him. I disagree with the fact that people are always mindful of, hey, you know what, 5 years from now, it's going to be great. Every year, it's about right now. Like, it was great last year. If they're not winning a championship this year, I guarantee you in February when we're doing this show, people are going to be hot.
I disagree about everyone saying it's great in 5 years. The only team that I've ever seen play it that way is the Patriots. I've never seen any other team play the long game, ever. Yeah. The entire NFL backloads every contract. Everything is about right this second. Always. And to me, that is, you tell me, Eric, you're the analytics guy. That's market inequity. You should be taking advantage of that.
Yeah. All these teams have different spending structures, to your point. And there's a gap. There's certainly a gap to be had. And especially now with the Chiefs, again, there's really no reason to be desperate for anything right now. I know that's antithetical to the players should all be desperate every single play, but from a management standpoint, it's you want to be in the mix for the next. Look at the Rams. Look at the Rams. They won the Super Bowl. We're happy for them. They're not getting back forever now. Just the way it is.
Yeah. How much worse is this defense, Jeff, without them?
They're horrible.
I object to that. That's why I asked you.
I'm joking. I think they go from being maybe what were they last year? 12, 13, 14, middle pack.
No, they were higher than that. They were top 10 in points allowed.
Okay.
And yards allowed, I think they were 11, but I'll have that answer for you here in 1 second.
Okay. They become they're in the 20s and no pass rush, which is a big factor in what they want to be able to do defensively. he changes the game immensely in that regard. Like I said, it's like losing Nikola Jokic from the Denver Nuggets. Like you just don't have your horse in the middle to make things go.
By the way, I was wrong. I'll correct it here in a second. But let me ask you, when was Chris Jones better, in 21 or 22?
22 by a country mile.
Okay. In 21, they were 8th in points, 27th in yards. In 22, they were 16th in points, 11 in yards.
Okay,
Well,
so
they were
that was
better
closer to
last
what
year.
it was.
Yeah. So,
But their pass rush was more consistent last year.
Yes,
They
it
were
was.
much better after the passer.
Yes.
And so if you want,
and it was more concentrated on Chris than it ever has been, right? Like he was the.
Yeah, I don't see how you're going to make hay in this conference with all the quarterbacks you have to deal with without having a competent pass rush. And to find that, I mean, they've got some guys who were solid, but this guy's all pro. This guy probably is going to be a Hall of Famer if he's able to put up some decent numbers the next couple of years. Like those guys don't come around very often.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartely, and I think they're blitzing in preseason.
Yeah.
Now, part of
that, to get used to it.
And I'm trying to figure out what it is, and part of it, I think, is they're like, listen, we blitz all the time. We've seen them. We're on tape with this. We're not. Who are we fooling? Sitting back here in coverage. Let's play the way we're going to play, and I think partially because this is how we're going to have to play with Jones out, and everybody knows it. So let's not screw around with it. Let's get to practicing how we're going to play. Would be my assumption. You see it differently, Eric?
No, I think that Spagnuolo, I mean, they're in the Patriot way now, right? Where like they don't really give a crap about giving away stuff. They don't really give a crap about failing. They just, they're going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to work their way into it, and they have the benefit of being able to do so because, of how good the offense is.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let's talk about the backup quarterback. It's a competition now. I'll let you hear a little bit of Matt Nagy talking about Shane Buechele. This was supposed to be Blaine Gabbert's job. At least that was the perception. Here's Nagy talking about what he's seen from Buechele.
Yeah, you know what? For me, it's been really neat watching him grow, coming in last year, not knowing him, and just seeing where he's been as a player, as a person. Learning this offense has certainly helped. Being in that room with Pat. So now, I mean, the off season, the preseason games, it's all about opportunities, and Coach has a great way of just going through those type of battles at all positions, and I think the competition brings out the best in everybody, and you see that with Shane. He gets a chance last week to do that and goes in and plays well, and you love being able to see guys have success when they behind the scenes they put in all this work and they do all this stuff behind the scenes in practice all last couple of years, and now to get an opportunity, he's played well.
You think he's played well, Jeff?
Yeah, he looks good.
Better than Gabbert?
Yeah. I mean, he didn't have an incompletion at all in the last game, right? And look, you take it with a grain of salt because he's playing against the twos, and that's a horrible team, by the way.
The Cardinals,
that's a team that's easily the worst team in the NFL. I don't have to think about who's picking first. They already got the pick out of the Texans to work with that. But yeah, they're a bad football team. But I like his moxie. I like his athletic ability. He's very confident in what he's doing. You can see that he's picked up some things from watching Mahomes. He's very decisive with the football. Not the biggest guy in the world, but I think what you just don't know is how will that translate when you're playing real games and there's real pressure on you if the quarterback is hurt. And that is, you can look great in preseason, but when it comes down to actually being in those situations, there's a reason why guys like Chad Henne and Matt Moore were able to execute because they've seen it before. And so that's the only thing I worry about with him is that, it's like you haven't been up against real defenses, against real coordinators who were going to give you a lot more problems than what you've seen already.
Eric, where do you sit on the backup quarterback?
I agree with a lot of the stuff Jeff said. I think a lot of that's unknown. The Chiefs tried to simulate it a little bit on Saturday by having him play with some of the starters. I thought that was pretty cool and probably something you don't need to see out of Blaine Gabbert. And so, I'm with Sam, who on your show yesterday was like, if they would have just like left Gabbert on the bench and said, hey, you're playing next week, it wouldn't have caused as big of a stir than putting Gabbert in the game, which is funny. But what I like about Buechele, and this has been different, is like if your quarterback's hurt, chances are your offensive line has gotten him hurt to an extent. That's not always true, but that's somewhat the case. And I like the fact that he can move around. I think quarterbacks, backups who are statues in the pocket, obviously can work. Reed's obviously made that a thing with Matt Moore and Chad Henne so far. But I think adding Buechele's legs adds an element to the offense when Mahomes is out that, could be positive.
Yeah. I feel like Blaine Gabbert would be the guy if they play one game, but if they're going to play like, 6 games, 7 games, then let's see what we got in Buechele.
Which, by the way, Andy Reid's done before. In 2005, when your guy McNabb tore his ACL, he leapfrogged Coy Detmer for someone named Mike McMahon for like the last 7 games of the year. And so like he's done that before with like kind of established guys like Coy Detmer who gives a crap if he has to play a game or two, but for 6 or 7 games, he has done that before in the past.
And they've had to go to the backup quarterback quite a bit with Patrick Mahomes. Not like he's constantly hurt, but it's happened quite a few times that they've needed it, whether it's, as Temecula says here, 90-plus yard drive in the playoffs, who do you go with? I mean, it's like I think it's a coin toss, which speaks to where they are. I think also the league minimum salary that Blaine Gabbert got speaks to their confidence in Blaine Gabbert, right? He's not coming in here on the Chad Henne $4 or $5 million deal. Like that's
I think that's also more about just economics too, right? I mean, it's like they're trying. I think they're trying to transition into a place where they could have a younger quarterback behind him, but I just don't know if Andy trusts being in that position with a guy who's just not that experienced. And so it's never been his MO. What's that?
Do we think they keep 3 then? Does to your point, Jeff? Like,
oh yeah, I think it shows too. Yeah, definitely keep 3.
Yeah, if Gabbert's making the minimum, then who cares if he's dressed on? Well, he has to. They're dressed now on Sundays. The third quarterback. Like, who cares if he's active in just one game? But he's only making the league minimum. Granted, guaranteed, but it's not that much. So to keep the 3 quarterbacks, to your point, Jeff, is economical at this point.
Why is Clyde Edwards-Helaire being featured so much, Jeff?
Well, he's still – look, I think GMs and coaches don't like giving up on first-round picks. It's a big part of this. He's a likable guy, even though he missed the parade. They want to see him succeed. They want to validate what they did, and guys are hurt. If Isaiah Pacheco was healthy, we probably wouldn't be seeing as much of him. But what this is telling me is that if Pacheco, which I'm assuming is probably not going to be 100% in week 1, they're not going to be comfortable using him as if he's 100%. I think we're going to see a lot more of Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the start of the year, carrying the football, catching the football, and it's. You wonder how much the enemy being gone may have opened up some doors for him. Maybe Matt Nagy likes him a little more. Maybe they're not as tough on him as the enemy probably was. He was the running backs coach. He's, pretty tough on that position. But he hasn't done a whole lot as far as I'm concerned. Looks the same player to me. But somebody's got to be out there. Might as well be him right now.
Are they trying to just showcase him and see if they can get a 6th or 7th round pick for the guy, Eric?
No. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, nobody's trading for him.
No, I mean, there's really Edwards-Helaire is going to have more value to what Jeff's point is. He's going to have more. The endowment effect is going to mean that he's going to have more value to Brett Veach than anybody else because no one is as invested in him as Brett Veach, and he stinks, right? Like, and my issue, maybe I'll back this up. Like, was Edwards-Helaire trigger warning? Was Edwards-Helaire that bad last year when he was healthy?
No.
Like, I mean, this team can win with Edwards-Helaire as the running back. Pacheco was much better than him last year, but this offense has dealt with a lot worse at running back. And I think that the Chiefs are looking at him like, yeah, he's really not he's really not, lived up to draft expectations, but Is he bad enough to cut? I don't think he's bad enough to cut is kind of the issue.
Edwards-Helaire had a higher rate, touchdowns per carry, which is pretty small sample size, but he did. Pacheco had a higher yards per carry, 4.9 to 4.3. Who had the longer run?
Well, he had that one run where he held the ball with both hands the whole time against San Diego. That because he was scared of fumbling.
Well, I mean, just like Isaiah Pacheco is God's gift in Kansas City to the running back position. His longest run in the year with 170 carries was 31 yards. In 71 carries, Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a 52-yarder.
Oh, boy. There you go.
Did you bet?
I'm actually just trying to make you look good, Eric. You said, is he that?
Well, I know. My issue is again, I think Pacheco's better for sure. Although, we got to wait for year 2. But Clyde it's not like Clyde had a terrible fumble against the Ravens in week 2 of 2021. He's been hurt a ton. And he looks awkward now when he gets out in the open field. It's like we're not talking about a practice squad running back. We're talking about a bust as a first-round pick. There's daylight there, I think.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk about the wide receiver position. We'll start with a little bit of Matt Nagy talking about where he sits right now with all his wide receivers.
Yeah, I'll give my honest opinion on all those guys when the time comes. I think it's been a really good camp for those guys. There's some guys that have come in and shown that they've been able to take the playbook on right away, not make the same mistakes twice. And that's one of the things that I mentioned before is we look for that. Who keeps making the same mistakes? Who has the ability, do you see a ceiling with them with where they're at talent-wise, or do they have the ability to grow and develop?
Do you see a ceiling? Do they have the ability to grow and develop? What do you see with the wide receivers right now, Jeff?
I see possibilities. I see potential. What's tough to evaluate with the Chiefs offense at this time of year is that the quarterback is so tremendous, and a lot of the coverage they're going to see are pretty basic. And so you're not really seeing defenses really game planning in the way you would during the regular season. And so I just don't know, with guys like Rashee Rice, who looked really good. I mean, what impressed me was how he ran with the football, how physical he looked. He looked more athletic. He was kind of sold as a Larry Fitzgerald type 50-50 ball, DeAndre Hopkins. And he's got some get up and go. I mean, he's got some burst to him. But you just don't know. I mean, it's really – and my feeling as I watched Rashee Rice in that game was they're really featuring him, but that's not going to be the way it is when they're playing real football. It's going to be a lot of Travis Kelce. It's going to be a lot of guys catching a couple balls. And does he have the focus to go a couple quarters without being targeted? That felt more like a college-style offense they were running where he was just being fed the ball over and over again. They were handing it to him on jet sweeps. It was, let's get him going. But I saw the talent for sure. And I think Sky Moore has shown – I've always liked Sky Moore. Richie James has shown something. Justin Ross has shown something. It's just – again, they're hard to evaluate because you just don't know how it's going to look when they're playing against real DBs and seeing a real pass rush and having to make real adjustments.
Let's hear Matt Nagy. I asked him specifically about Sky Moore. I believe your guys' pick to be the leading receiver for the Chiefs. What is it? What goes into being a year 2 wide receiver in this offense?
I think growth within the system of being able to play fast because he knows where to go. He's had the talent last year, just learning the offense and now being able to transition to playing faster, and now he'll get more opportunities, and I think he'll do well.
Is this offense difficult for a rookie tonight? Just any more difficult than any other at the wide receiver position? Kind of to follow up to what Pete said about Sky Moore and maybe Rashee Rice having this.
Sure. I would relate it to this. I would say that the college game right now, because of the no huddle and there's not a lot of words at all. Like when they do huddle, there's still not a lot, but there's so much no huddle now that when kids get here, you get in the huddle and you hear long words. That's the hard part. If you have veterans that come from other teams, it's just like learning a new language. You got to take what you did before and learn how now we say it. So for the rookies coming in, that's why that first year, it's never really that easy because the college games. Now we're also transitioning. A lot of teams are transitioning to a lot of the college stuff because you want to be able to make it easier for those guys as they come in.
So that makes sense that Rashee Rice and Justyn Ross are getting a bunch of reps because they want to get them into the flow of things. Does that mean that Sky Moore, they're all set with him? Because 2 catches for 6 yards. I mean, they clearly, to Jeff's point, I agree. They wanted to get the football into the hands of Justyn Ross and Rashee Rice. I think if they wanted to get the football into Sky Moore's hands, they could get it to him more. They haven't done it much. Is that because he's so locked in, or is that because they're, moving on? Eric?
I mean, I think they've only gotten the ball into Valdes-Scantling's hand once, right? And those are the 2 starters. So I think it's a little bit of, if Ross, I think they love for Rice, Ross, and those guys to be starters someday. Their starters right now are Moore and Valdes-Scantling. They also have a training camp, which I think because of the intensity of training camp, those practices in the aggregate matter much, much more than the games. So I think that there's a little bit of trying to showcase the younger guys. And I think that there's a little bit, and I think there's a little bit of the fact that those 2 guys are the starters right now, and more specifically, I think it's the number 1 guy, speaks to his productivity in the practice rather than the games.
Yeah. All right, one more, the terminology. Right, I asked him about that. It's so complex. It's tough for the rookies. Rashee Rice has got to come in and figure out the whole terminology. I asked Matt Nagy how tough it'll be for a guy like Rice to get it all down.
I wouldn't say the terminology as much as just no huddle. A lot of these kids, a lot of offenses right now are no huddle. So when these kids come here, they have to learn how to get in a huddle, how to listen to what the words that speak to you are. When you go line up, where to go. And then we have a bunch of conversions and assignments, alignments, adjustments within one play, within 40 seconds that these guys got to react to. It's not just going out and just playing fast and, getting 115 plays in a game. We're averaging 65 to 70. So that's the part that's a little bit different, Phil.
How about it? By the way, I love this. You ever get too hyped about the team? Come to the Red Gold and Bold, we'll bring you back down to old Chief football feelings, proverbial first-round exit. No, I don't think that's what we're getting at. Just trying to be realistic.
Somebody picked them to win the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, that's right. You did. But there is a lot to like about Rashee Rice. And, Jeff, you talked about, his explosiveness. They ought to be able to at least have the package of plays. You should at least be able to have the Kadarius Toney, package of plays that he can fit in, right? There's no reason for him to just fade away and not have an impact on this offense based upon what you've seen from him in preseason so far.
Well, they should, but again, what you don't know, because there's so many bodies, and we're not even talking about Kadarius Toney. Someone mentioned him in the comments section, how he fits into it, because they have high hopes for him as well when he comes back from his own injury. That, legitimately, Rashee Rice, look, I think he's, from what I've seen, has a bright future, but he could legitimately be the 5th guy in the pecking order here, because Justin Watson's a factor here, and I think Richie James is going to show some stuff, and Moore and Valdes-Scantling, and Travis is going to get the bulk of the workload anyway. But I think what Nagy said in that clip was very important to remember, is that these guys, especially these young guys like Rice, are going through a lot of transition. And he talked about the thing he said in that clip that was really important was how much they ask of the receivers to adjust, in the 40 seconds, what they're looking at. Well, most defenses now are getting played in the NFL, this 2-eye safety. It's not just a conservative thing. It's like they play that way so they can shift all these coverages. They're making receivers adjust after the snap. And so if you've never had to do that as a college player, which is, you look over the sideline and you see whatever they're putting up there, a poker sign or, Beyonce, and you're running your route based off that, it's simple, but when it's plays called out and you got to adjust before the snap, and you got to adjust after the snap, if you're in the wrong spot, the ball's not coming your way. And so that's where Rashee Rice has a big challenge here. Doesn't mean he didn't have the talent, but just as Sky Moore, I don't think Sky Moore was any less talented last year. He just knows what he's doing now. And so that's where I see Rashee Rice having to grow up a lot.
Eric, you like Beyonce.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't, Petro?
I just wanted to react.
Yeah.
I do love the signs where it's like a dog and it's, it's everything that's up there. No, but I mean, where are you? Are you expecting bigger things now from Rashee Rice since you've seen him have the game he had last week? Are you expecting bigger from Justyn Ross? We haven't mentioned him either, but he has looked good as well.
To me, the preseason is and I know like we'll contradict ourselves with Mahomes because we're all like all the stuff Mahomes did in 17. We're all like, oh, we knew, But for me, the preseason is almost always a cross a guy off the list as opposed to add a guy to a list situation. So if Lewis Cine is playing third quarter of a Vikings preseason game against nobodies, I'm going to cross him off the list. But like if I see Blake Bortles with an arm slot that's at his hip, I'm going to cross him off the list. And like if I see Justyn Ross can't get open against corners that are third stringers on the 1-17 Arizona Cardinals this year, I'm going to cross them off the list. What Rashee Rice and Justyn Ross did was keep me from crossing them off the list. They like passed all the tests, but like the preseason's a pass fail for me. Like if the guy Amir Smith-Marset was amazing on Saturday too, and like I'm not putting him on this team.
Yeah, no, I get it. Do we think it's a strength? We'll wrap up the wide receiver conversation. And how many do they keep? Do you got an idea on that, Jeff? How many they'll end up running with?
I think it will be a strength by the end of the season. I think there'll be ups and downs. If you were to look at the stats from last year and look at where the fourth and fifth best guys were, and that's what I would throw Noah Gray in there, Eric's Noah Gray in there. Really, the guys like Rashee Rice are probably going to catch about 25 balls. Which was not bad for a rookie. I mean, it's a start, but I think ultimately they're going to be fine because they're playing with the best quarterback in the league. And so, they'll find a way to make it work. I think they're going to play a different style than what we're used to seeing. But I think that the ability level's there, the variety's there. And it's just, you can't bet against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, whoever they're working with.
Yeah, no, I agree. What do you think? Is it a strength, Eric?
It will be. I think, I think fans look at Justyn Ross, they look at Rashee Rice, and when they see in week one, Valdez-Scantling, Moore, and Justin Watson getting, 60, 70% of the routes, they're going to be like one thing you saw on Saturday that you did not see a ton last year was Watson and Valdez-Scantling on the field at the same time. They were basically 1 and 2 last year at the deep threat position. They have designs for Watson to play across the formation this year. And so, early on, I think fans are going to be a little bit disappointed because I think they're going to play the guys with some experience more than the younger guys. I think at the end of the year, I agree 100% with Jeff. I think because of injuries and because of like at the end of the season, Sky Moore was a perfectly fine wide receiver backup guy for the Chiefs who scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Kadarius Toney, when he was healthy, similarly, even though he wasn't productive most of the year, he had a great game against the Chargers. I think that as the season progresses, each one of those guys are going to get a shot and they're going to perform. But early on, it's not going to be like Rashee Rice going for 7 for 90 and a touchdown in week one.
I'll ask you this. Is this the best all-around wide receiver room Pat has had? It's tough. Tyreek Hill is so good that just he alone. But
Sammy Watkins is also.
Let's put it this way. With the last 3 receivers, if they end up in a game like they were in the AFC Championship game where they were down to Marcus Kemp, Jody Fortson, and Noah Gray lining up in a 3 wide with Travis Kelce at the tight end, is this better?
I mean, yeah, it's better than that.
Yes, the bottom is definitely better.
Yeah.
If that's the question, is the depth better? Yes. I think this is the deepest receiver room for sure. Deepest. I won't say it's the best. Well, I'll change the question because I think that's the spirit of what Nick meant. I think it's not better because you don't have Tyreek Hill because he's that good. But the depth at the back end, as you go through the season, guys go down. I think there's a chance that they're better all around. And Eric, the third wide receivers who you preach, is this their best third wide receiver?
Yeah, I mean, like
emerge out of this.
And I think it's even different than that, Petro. Like, I don't even think it's necessarily the third wide receiver. How many things do the Chiefs wide receiving core have a weakness? Is the question, right? Because you put the puzzle pieces together, and it's Valdez-Scantling deep. It's Sky Moore running the Juju routes. It's Kadarius Toney running the McCole Hardman, DeAnthony Thomas type stuff. It's like, is there, and then it's all open up for Kelce in the middle of the field. Like, what I like about this team also is that there's variability in who they are. You look at the New York Giants, and they had a great game Friday night, but like all their wide receivers do the same thing, and they got a great tight end. Like, what I like about this group is it's diverse, and so there's never going to be a situation where that there isn't like there's a coverage they can't beat, interestingly, right? So their issue in 21 was once teams ran too high, they were like, we're either going to have Tyreek run, all basically deep routes where he's not getting the ball as a decoy and going to Kelsey, or we're going to clog the middle of the field with both those guys. Whereas last year, you had the too high stuff some games and they defeated that. You had the single coverage stuff in other games, they defeated that. And I think that that's the benefit and one of the underrated parts about how they've evolved since Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to be Sky Moore doing the Juju role. I think that's going to be Rashee Rice or Kadarius Toney. It's going to be a bigger guy doing that kind of role. But I do like it. I like the group. I think Rice and I'm impressed with Justyn Ross's stop-start is really impressive because he's not going to just burn guys, but he definitely gets them. He changes directions when they're on the wrong foot. I mean, Jeff, he does have you've been a defensive back and had to try to stay with guys. I mean, he does know when to make the cut, and he's
he looks good. But I hate to be the downer here. I feel like he's heading to the practice squad again.
Okay,
I just think the numbers game is not going to be in his favor. But maybe the upside is that all these guys, if they're able to show something, I mean, there's going to be opportunity somewhere. I just think at some point you got too many guys. Not everybody's going to be in the mix, right? You got Toney, MBS, Watson, Moore, Rice. That's 5 guys right there.
Yeah, I will say this though. This one I will say, just glad we aren't going to see Marcus Kemp and a wide receiver come AFC.
You're jinxing it. You said last year, Petro, that we were done with Marcus Kemp, and he came back.
I was going to chastise that comment and say that is erroneous. Don't put that out there because he wasn't on the roster at this time last year, or maybe it was like whenever the cutdowns came, and he was certainly on the roster. There's a familiarity, there's a comfort level.
Marcus Kemp's got still has a locker in Arrowhead or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. All right, one more preseason game to go. We'll break that down next week on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Remember, we're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear. Since 1994, why risk accidents, liability problems in your parking lot? They can all be fixed. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One call does it all, 816-484-3338. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810, WHB in Kansas City, saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.